Slavery, the trafficking in human beings. Haven't we seen the last of human bondage? After more than 10 years of global efforts to combat slavery, the heartbreaking reality is that this massive multi-billion-dollar criminal activity continues to grow. Ever-increasing numbers of men, women, and children are kidnapped and forced against their will into a factory, home, a field, a brothel, or a war zone. More than 27 million people are slaves today. Over 21 million are women and children. At least 2 million of these victims are in the United States. In spite of these tragic figures, there are modern-day abolitionists who battle human trafficking. This film will tell the story of 5 such heroes across the globe, from the Far East to even here in the shadow of our country's capital. They work to rescue victims and to prosecute the traffickers. Not for sale. 2. Join the fight. Cambodia has had more than 30 years of war. The Vietnam War was followed by the violent Khmer Rouge takeover of the country. Nearly 2 million Cambodians died by execution, forced labor, or starvation. Then Vietnam invaded. Finally, they were occupied by United Nations troops, all of which has left its infrastructure in ruins and its population devastated by AIDS. It has become a land of widows and orphans who are often forced into prostitution or slave-like labor in factories. In the little more than 10 years that Ted and Sue Olbrich have been in Cambodia, they have established more than 3,000 churches and founded more than 100 church orphan homes.
One of the biggest problems in Cambodia is trafficking of young girls that come in to work at the garment factories. They're mainly uneducated country girls with little prospect for anything in life other than hopefully to find a husband, and if they don't have money, that's difficult. And so they get jobs in the garment factories, and of course they're preyed upon by the pimps and those that would like to get them to enter the sex trade.
In the U.S., men, women, and children are vulnerable to every type of trafficking. While government and law enforcement efforts have increased prosecution against the trafficking of foreigners, U.S. women and children are particularly at risk from traffickers due to the lack of any coordinated efforts to protect them. Catherine Chon is co-founder of the Polaris Project, dedicated to combating modern slavery. Polaris is one of the largest anti-trafficking organizations in the United States.
Traffickers aren't just victimizing foreign nationals and bringing them across borders, but trafficking in most countries, including here in the United States, victimizes its own citizens and residents. It's the internal trafficking that's the greater problem. When I first learned about that, I was shocked again, because it's one thing to hear about a mother in Cambodia living in a rural village having to make ends meet and selling her daughter to a neighbor or someone else who was offering a job. But when we first learned about American children being sold by their mothers, we had one client who was sold 2 days before her 14th birthday by her mother to a sex trafficker. It again reminded us that this world is very small, that traffickers, they don't discriminate according to age, ethnicity, culture, sometimes even gender. Traffickers are just looking to make profit off of human beings.
Diana was just a young, happy-go-lucky girl before this all happened to her. And she died at 20. Just because she fell for somebody. and he got into her head. That's basically it. He was known as the most successful pimp in Portland at that time, and at that time he was her age at 20.
Pimps and traffickers target people, they target children, they target women in general, for every background.
There has never been the demand that there is now for young girls and women, trafficked young girls and women.
All this that happened in a very short period of time could have killed me, and almost did in a lot of ways. I had no self-esteem, I had no worth. I felt like the only thing that I could do was something that made me feel horrible about myself. The only thing I could do to have a place to sleep and to survive was to have sex with men. And I was still a baby.
Thailand is recognized worldwide as a site for sex tourism. Girls from all over the globe are trafficked into the country. While some efforts have been made by authorities against traffickers, the recent government turmoil has limited any significant progress. Annie Dieselberg co-founded Nightlight International in 2006 to help combat the complex issues surrounding trafficking and the sexual exploitation of women and children in Thailand.
Women from Thailand are literally, they are sent all over the world into the sex trade. A lot of them go from here to LA, a lot of them go to Germany, a lot of them go to places like Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, all over the world. But Thailand is also, strangely, a place that brings in women from all over the world for the sex industry. And this area is one of the most international sex trade areas in Thailand. And on any given night, we can talk to women and children from as many as 14, 15 different countries. 2 of the streetwalkers in the last 3 to 4 months have been murdered by their clients. And as one streetwalker said to us recently, I asked her, I said, are you afraid here on the street? Because 2 women from this street have been killed in the last few months. And she said, I want to die. If I die and I go to hell, it'll be better than this.
While sex trafficking is a horrendous problem everywhere in the world, authorities have found that the most common form of trafficking in the United States is men, women, and even children forced into domestic servitude or debt bondage in the agricultural, manufacturing, or service industries. Identification and protection of these victims is extremely difficult.
She told me, dogs have more rights than you in this country. You are here illegally and nobody can trust you. If you go to the police, they might put you in jail because you have no papers. You are here illegally. And she told me many times, and if you do something, I will call to the INS and they send you back, and not only send you back, they might put you in jail.
International Justice Mission is headquartered in Washington, D.C., founded by former Department of Justice lawyer Gary Haugen. It is a human rights agency with more than 14 field offices around the globe. It was established in 1997 to rescue the victims of modern slavery and to ensure that the traffickers are prosecuted.
Why are all these victims of sex trafficking and slavery poor? I mean, there must be this connection between the slavery that they're in and the sex trafficking and poverty. This must be a problem of poverty. And I think it really is, but it's a problem of poverty that's different than I thought. The problem with being poor is not necessarily that you don't have money. The problem is that you don't get law enforcement. That is to say, you don't get basic protection in your person or in your property. So all of these victims that we've seen rescued from rock quarries as slaves or from brick kilns or rescued from brothels, yes, they had problems because they were poor. And so that made them more willing to believe some of the lies that the sex traffickers and slave traders would tell them that would entice them away from their places of protection like their village or their home. But once they get there, they don't learn the truth, and then they have the opportunity to say, oh, well, I didn't know that I was going to be a slave. I didn't know I was going to be in a brothel. I'm going to leave now. So the thing that keeps them there is violence.
Many times she comes, and I don't know how do you say this, do this? Pinch. Hit me in my body, in my back.
After 2 years trying to figure out how my beautiful daughter could get involved in this. And I sat in these courtrooms, and the first girl testified. Then I went up and saw the other girl, and I sat there and tears streamed down my face, and I went, oh my God, that's what my daughter went through. And it finally clicked that those emotions, why she was so dead, why you couldn't get emotions out of her. It was gone. Her emotions were Diana was emotionally dead before she was murdered. Truly emotionally dead before she was murdered. So I saw a daughter that in the past had sparkle to her eyes, that she had joy in her eyes. And when I would approach her on certain things, that joy, that sparkle was completely gone. It was like you were looking at a blank face. Her face was completely blank.
I see a streetwalker. She walking down the street. She gonna be sold again, so her kids can eat.
Ana Rodriguez has been recognized both nationally and internationally for her work with victims of human trafficking. She established the Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking to help local law enforcement and federal authorities identify and assist modern victims of slavery. Florida Coalition has offices throughout Florida to help rescue and restore these victims.
Based on our work, based on the information that we're getting from ex-traffickers that have come forward, some of them talk about, trafficking anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 people a day. We're talking that in the United States there could be more than 2 million victims right now as we speak. Victims of human trafficking can be as young as a baby. It could be as young as a 5-6-year-old. It is said that 80% of the victims of human trafficking are women and children, and they're being used mostly for the sex trafficking, prostitution, pornography. The cases that we have uncovered here in the state of Florida, or particularly in the Southwest Florida area, the majority of the victims are young girls between the ages of 11 years old and 16 years old. We have had cases where we went to pick up a girl from a hospital because her baby had been ill with lung problems. And when we went to the hospital, we saw this baby, a 9-month-old baby that had no upper muscle development. All he could do was move his tongue and move his eyes. And when we took her back to a safe shelter, we realized while we were changing the baby's diaper, and we realized that the baby had been branded. The baby had the trafficker's initial carved to his back. Today, this baby is walking. This baby is moving like a very healthy baby. And we have found a doctor, a plastic surgeon, that once the baby is ready, he will